Kriston T. Harris here with the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. We've hosted open presidential debates since 2008. We are at Freedom Fest 2024 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And for many of the viewers out there that may be tuning in for the first time, we specialize in giving all candidates a platform that are running for office in order for them to be heard. And that includes presidential candidates and parties that are outside of the two-party system. As everyone knows, the two-party system is very controlled, whether it's Republican and Democrat. And sitting next to me is an interesting individual, Michael Heiss. He works with the Libertarian Party. And I guess let's start off by telling our listeners a little bit about what is the Libertarian Party, what are the principles, and what do you guys stand for?
So the Libertarian Party is based on the philosophy of libertarianism, which is the philosophy of individual liberty. So the easy way to put it is that all of our positions are derived from three basic principles, and that is self-ownership, non-aggression, and the non-aggression principle, and like freedom of association, essentially. And all of our positions can be kind of logically deduced from these three principles. And where we arrive at is a maximum of liberty for the individual, not group rights, or anything like that, but individual liberty from the virtue of humanity. And we believe that this type of society, a society based on voluntary interactions as opposed to coercion, particularly government coercion, is what's going to maximize prosperity and therefore happiness.
So what are some of the main things and differences that your platform offers than, let's say, the major two-party system?
Well, the two parties are saturated in coercion. They're saturated in government control of various types, especially for their own camp. And we're entering an era where we're at lawfare all the time. So it's not even politics. It's just open, warfare that isn't guns yet. So it's getting to be pretty insane. The fighting and the criminal activity, frankly, between both sides in an effort to keep that power and maintain that power.
Well, it's really interesting because when I first heard about the Libertarian Party, I almost thought it was the best of both parties, socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And when it comes to getting your candidate into debates and getting them involved in the discussion, what are some of the hurdles that you're finding when it comes to dealing with the two-party systems? Because I know for a lot of the listeners out there that may not know, the Libertarian Party is the largest party outside the Republican and Democrat Party in the United States, and it continues to grow. Although I know a lot of Republicans may identify as a small L, which is a diet libertarian per se. But what are some of the hurdles that you guys are seeing, and what are some ways you guys have been overcoming these hurdles?
So historically, the hurdles are access to the ballot. It's very restrictive. If you're a Republican or Democrat, it's quite easy to get on the ballot. In some places, you might only have to get 100 or 500 signatures to get on the ballot as a Republican or Democrat. You have to get thousands of them as a Libertarian. I mean, we had one situation where our governor candidate in New York in 2018, he did well enough in that election to earn ballot access for the next 4 years. And so he went to run again in 2022, and they just changed the rules and said, psych, you don't have ballot access. And then made it so ridiculously hard to gain ballot access in New York that it was only a Republican and Democrat on the ballot for the first time in like 30 years. So, I mean, that's one thing is the ballot. We don't get the coverage from the corporate media, which is becoming less and less of an issue. I'll get to that in a minute. And because of that, we're not often included in the polls, which then does not allow us to have access to the debates. So it's a near total blockade of anything, and I think you're seeing that even with like RFK. RFK doesn't get the coverage. RFK wasn't included in debates, and he's somebody who has immense name recognition. He's got millions and millions of dollars. He's got a PAC with tens of millions of dollars. He has all the resources he needs, and yet he's locked out, which means it's not actually about merit the way they try to make it out to be. It's about control. So those are the kind of hurdles, but I'm actually pretty optimistic that some of this stuff isn't going to be as much of an issue because we're entering an age where the media paradigm is completely falling apart and giving way to the podcast paradigm. And that's where anybody, especially on the younger side, is getting their information. That's going to continue to grow. And that is a media class that is more open to us and more open to our ideas and more open to having us on their shows than any media class that's ever existed. And I think you're already starting to see the ideas of liberty permeating the culture more and more as a result. It's just going to create opportunities.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned the whole podcast and live streaming media turnaround. Basically, that's where a lot of people are getting their information, is somebody who hosts a very popular independent news program, The Rundown Live, out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and have done it since 2008. It's interesting to see how people are moving away from the mainstream media, and they're going towards the average Joe who's just making his show when he gets off of work, or bringing in people that are outside of the normal two-party ideology to expand their idea of what is going on as far as politics is concerned. So when we dive into libertarianism, what are currently, would you say, the three major issues that the Libertarian Party is seeing, like as far as that are important to them in this election?
Well, I would say some of our issues tend to be evergreen because there are major issues that the two parties are always terrible on all the time. Particularly monetary policy. It's a conversation that Ron Paul opened up about the Federal Reserve and the nature of our money and where that comes from and how is it controlled and how that ought to be. This is and I think in a way the voters are saying that this is their biggest issue because they'll say the economy is the biggest issue, where at worst it's number two with immigration. And I think where that's coming from is they're feeling the pain of inflation. But I also think that they don't know where inflation comes from. It comes from primarily the printing of the money, which is, Trump was a bigger printer than any president ever, and then Obama was the biggest printer in history before him, and then so it's exceeding and accelerating. So that's a big issue, and having our control of our money the way it's supposed to be in the Constitution. So we're real big on legalizing gold and silver or Bitcoin as legal tender. Another one where both parties are the same is often foreign policy. And our willingness to use force overseas, or, even if we're not starting new wars, like Trump said, we're still assassinating Iranian leaders, risking World War III. We're still dropping more drones than had ever been done. So if we're not starting new wars in Syria and Libya, we're still dropping more drones than ever. And it's just, death all around. And I think, again, you're starting to see people who are growing in distrust of the state, but also wondering, why are they doing all this stuff when we're feeling so much pain? And so those are I would say, the evergreen issues of libertarianism.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the Federal Reserve, because if you're $34 trillion in debt, I want you guys to think about this out there. What kind of honest government can you have? Because it's almost like extortion, right? You owe them all this money. If you're doing something they don't like, who's to say that they're not going to try to call in on this loan and extort you in order to move your nation in a certain direction? Not only that, if every nation's in debt, where did all the money go? A lot of people don't really think about that. They're just like, well, every nation's in debt, so, we just don't care. What are we going to do about it?
Or what is money? What is money, period? Is it government printed paper, or is it a system of value that we the people create? And that's what the founding of our country said. And we've moved away from that since the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Well, yeah, the silver standard, having our money back in gold and silver, used to be printed right on the money that you could cash in your dollar bill and get silver in return. And it's really interesting because at Freedom Fest here in 2024 in Las Vegas, they have something called gold backs. Have you seen these gold backs?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And it's pretty cool. These gold back dollar bills, they fit in your wallet, and they're literally 24 karat gold, and it's spread thin on like a piece of plastic, and it's very flexible. The gold doesn't rub off, and you can usually actually spend it here. People are buying beer with it yesterday. I guess it's $17 a beer. You got to use gold to buy it, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about the gold back is the gold back originated in Utah, and Utah was the first state to do this thing that I'm talking about, where it's legalizing gold and silver as legal tender in the state. And that's the thing that allowed the gold back to take form. And there's several other things that can happen as a result of legalizing gold and silver. Like you can have gold-backed banks. These things exist in some of these states. The Treasury can have a gold and silver depository to protect the value of the people in their state against this inflation. And all of those things are made possible by just allowing us to choose our money instead of being force-fed this paper crap that the Federal Reserve gives us.
Well, the other question I've always had as an individual is, why don't we just print our own money instead of paying interest to a international banking cartel that charges us interest? What's wrong with our printers?
Well, we don't have the monopoly on fraud the way that the state does. That's the problem.
Well, there's a lot of truth there. So let's dive in a little bit into your candidate, Chase Oliver. What can you tell us about Chase Oliver? I'm hoping to interview him on the Free and Equal Network here, hopefully today or tomorrow, or at least before the end of the weekend. But what can you tell us about Chase Oliver? He's your guys' nominated candidate. I heard Donald Trump was at the Libertarian National Convention. I watched the video. I found that pretty interesting. I heard there's a little bit of shenanigans that went on there with that. And then Robert F. Kennedy was trying to get the nomination, I believe, as well for the Libertarian Party. So what can you tell me about your candidate, Chase Sullivan?
Well, he's a plumb line libertarian. I mean, he's in line with the things that I'm saying, especially about the warfare state and bringing some money back, these kinds of things. So he's good at getting the message out there, and I think that's what the candidacy is good for. Trying to get our recruitment up and get the message out as far as possible. I mean, if we're being honest and we're being frank, we're not going to win the presidential election. So I think we have to derive value from this race somewhere else other than winning. And then as far as the convention, the Libertarian Party invited Trump and RFK and Biden to the convention because the parties blamed us for, both of them blamed us for why they lost. So we're now, our thinking is at this point is, why not leverage this position? We're not going to win the election. We're not going to get the value there. We're not going to expand our agenda there. So why not leverage what we do have to get something? And it worked out great. I mean, Biden didn't show up, but Trump did. RFK did, and obviously they did that in an attempt to gain libertarian votes, which then forced them to gain or to give concessions and to make promises. So, like, both of them at this point have promised to free Ross Ulbricht. RFK and Trump have both promised to free Ross Ulbricht, which is something that is very important to libertarians.
For people who don't know who that is, maybe let our viewers know who that is.
So Ross Ulbricht was the creator of the Silk Road, which was a totally free marketplace some time ago, and basically allowed you to trade on the dark web in Bitcoin, and you could pretty much buy whatever you want. And people were using it for drugs. And what ended up happening is essentially what libertarians always said would happen if we opened drugs to the marketplace. People weren't keeling over and dying in OD. People weren't shooting each other for the drugs that were being sold. The crime went down, and a true marketplace and competition opened up, at which, you started seeing testing kits in the drugs that were being sold, and people knew what they had and the quality. And again, so you didn't see people dying of overdoses and snorting fentanyl and not knowing what they're getting. You didn't see, gangs shooting each other over the Silk Road. Like, none of this stuff happened. So he was made an example of and given a double life sentence with no priors as a result of that, having never sold drugs, having never trafficked drugs or anything. He just made the website. So Trump said that on day one that he would pardon him, and he also promised to put a libertarian in his cabinet. And that's certainly the first time I've ever seen a major party candidate, and at this point the presumptive next president, coming to us and actually doing this to earn our vote. So I would say the Libertarian Party is now entering the real world of real politics, where we can extract some value for our agenda and not just be a supporter.
Michael Heiss, thank you very much for joining us. Do you have anything else for us here on the Free and Equal Network as we're diving into other Freedom Fest guests here? I think it's been very informational to learn about the Libertarian Party. I remember a quick aside, when I first learned about the Libertarian Party, I took one of those quizzes, like, where do you stand politically? And, do you want the government out of your life, out of your bedroom, out of your personal decisions? Are you fiscally conservative? Should, people's opinions, make laws that are, like banning things? And I'm like, well, just because you don't like something doesn't mean you should ban it. Just all these interesting questions. I think it was a 100-question questionnaire, and it turned out that I was like a libertarian, and I was like, what is this? I got to look into this. This is back in like 2007, 2008. And that's when I really found out about the party. And then I found out that there's prominent people like Trey Parker, Matt Stone, who are libertarians, and other, for those that don't know, that is Traders of South Park. And, there's other people out there. Vince Vaughn, I believe. I actually just met Vince Vaughn at a Dungeons and Dragons convention in Lake Geneva.
That's awesome.
He was like, I talked to him. He's like, oh, I love Ron Paul. I got 20 seconds to talk to him. He's, real cool about it. Pretty interesting guy, above and beyond other things. But Michael Heiss, thank you for your time. And where can people find out about the Libertarian Party?
So that's lp.org, and I would say go to lp.org/join and consider joining the party. I'm not asking people to be a partisan. I'm not asking people to change their registration. I am asking you to join the party as a member and support the projects that I'm talking about, like the Defend the Guard legislation, which would bar the states from deploying their National Guard overseas without an actual declaration of war, and our renewed focus on city council, mayor, and school board candidates.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mike Heiss. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Free and Equal Network. We're going to see who else we can grab over here to get some interviews in. We got some interesting individuals hopefully coming up here soon. We'll be back, so you guys don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. freeandequal.org. Make sure you guys check it out. Kristan T. Harris. We'll be back. Stay tuned.